In this episode, James will see a turtle crossing the road. He'll also watch his grandfather help the turtle cross the road. All the while, he'll be learning about his dark ancestors. Oh, and, invent a new spell for wiping his ass.
They stood on a long stretch of dirt road with trees along both sides. James remembered now that it went on for a mile before it ended at the old house his grandpa used to call their castle.
She'll probably post those pics on Instagram before realizing that I just kidnapped you.
Arthur said, taking off his enchanted rivet spectacles.
Those glasses are wild. You should have used them to break out of that nut joint a long time ago.
When I was led away by the authorities, they were sitting in my coffer, up in the attic, along with the Suniri lamp.
Arthur explained, stowing the spectacles in his coat's pocket. James realized it would have been silly to ask the police to fetch his glasses and an old lamp from his locked chest as he was being dragged away. He looked up at his grandfather.
Hey, will I come back for college?
Unlikely. Are you really attached to this world? You were only supposed to keep a low profile and live out your days with me while studying to become a sorcerer.
He shook his head.
I never meant for all this to happen.
James looked at him.
I don't know. I don't know this old world. Like, they don't have toilets. Oh wait, can you use magic when you go to the bathroom? Like, wipe my assimus!
Arthur snorted.
You'll miss the toilets, James.
So tell me about Dad.
Arthur looked at him, appraising his expression, before saying,
I suppose you should not have to wonder where we got our name. We were dreadfuls from the start, James.
He started walking down the long dirt road, and James followed him.
I couldn't tell you about him when you were 5. It just didn't feel right. When I tell you we were dreadfuls from the start, I mean our roots.
James had been staring at a painted turtle crawling across the road and looked up at his grandpa.
What do you mean?
We dreadfuls all have particular traits in common. We have remarkable gold eyes. We come from a land of magic, and we were all born to a terrible kind of wicked witch called a Grawl. Dreadfuls were born in a swamp in Nobracoso, a dark land called Islad, which is in the realm of shadows. We practice the dark arts there. We are the descendants of a most disturbing bloodline. Witches, necromancers, and other abominations. Some of them gorged on human flesh and engaged in human sacrifices, and we were very well affiliated with the dead, resurrecting them, communicating with them. But it wasn't like that from the beginning. There was power in our bloodline, and the Wozigod feared us, so we were hunted and had to flee the Wozigod. We found the furthest and darkest corners of the old world to hide in, where we bred with the most loathsome abominations the world had to offer. And these people turned out to be you and me.
James stopped. He didn't look at his grandfather. Rather, he looked at the turtle struggling over a clump of weeds.
Well, you seem okay.
Arthur gave a small chuckle that seemed to suggest something he did not care to impart.
I wanted to deny my roots,
Arthur said, helping the turtle cross the road with his hand.
But your mother taught me that we choose our own paths. Our paths are not predetermined by blood or habit, James, but by choice. And I decided a righteous one lay ahead of me. That is why she trusted me to help her son find his path. That is why she made both your Uncle Oscar and me your spell guardians.
James remembered the names Spell Guardian and Spell Father. His grandpa had always told him that he was his spell father.
I don't understand.
What don't you understand?
Well, why was my mother good and my father bad? Why were they even together?
It was an odd relationship, yes. You've probably always believed your father was a terrific sorcerer, but never gave much thought to her.
You never really told me much about her. I didn't think there was anything to know.
I am entirely at fault for that. Your mother was not a sorceress like your father, but she was very wise and clever. She managed to win his heart. She won the heart of a man with a dark soul. Some would call him a monster. Now, a woman of such power, why, she could move the tides like the moon, couldn't she?
How'd she die?
She was poisoned by your father's enemy, but before she died, she wanted to be sure that her son never followed in her husband's footsteps. She wanted you to be his legacy to the world, a way for your father to atone for all the evil he'd done. You have to be what he could not be.
What did he do?
I'll spare you the details.
But James remembered what he had seen that night. The screams, the laughter, the fire, the cold, dead eyes of a man that was as alien to him as that creature he saw in the haunted alleyway in Paris. It sent chills tickling down his spine. And did it have something to do with that evil laughter emanating from that book of his? James was silent for a while, and his grandfather continued to walk. He followed him.
You said he was bad.
You want
But
to
what?
know what kind of person he was? He was not always bad. Well, he did have a mean streak in him, but there was a lot of darkness. There were some things that I wasn't proud of, but, well, I wasn't there for him. And he ended up living with those horrid people. And they did things to him. A child seeing human sacrifices and the other unspeakable horrors in that realm gives me chills to this day. I feel I cannot forgive myself for it. It is sort of inherent in our blood. That savagery. It was best you came here, lest those creatures sought to find you while you were vulnerable, as a pariah.
Is that why you did some of those things? You know, all that stuff in the past? Wait, is that why I did those things that got me in trouble at school when I was younger too?
His grandfather's face turned ashen.
I was troubled in those days.
He admitted, realizing the folly of what James spoke of. He paused on the road.
About that time,
He fidgeted nervously with his stick.
it was challenging to settle here in this new life. And there was also,
He paused again.
well, Quislow said as much before. I was only a warp. I'd never had so much power before, with the scroll magic. And that power, James, can go to your head. I admit I was weak. I could use magic in a world that had none. I felt like a great sorcerer here. I could truly soar. I could put other wizards to shame. But back at home in Nobrocoso, I was a nobody.
Didn't you have scroll magic?
Scroll magic isn't really spectacular magic in the old world. Another wizard enchants a piece of paper to create it. And in order to cast the spell, all one need do is read it. It is without heart, weak, James. Yet here in Erd, it is still remarkable, even if it is just a bunch of flashy bangs or illusions, and it made me a legend. I thought I could be stronger than my son. I was not searching for power, only fame, but it still brought out the dark in me. You see, my past was dark too, and I believe the magic looks into your soul and reflects what is there. I thought I was teaching you to be strong, a trait I thought was an integral part of Dreadfuls. You were just a child.
He stopped.
I spent 9 years in a mental hospital, and it might have been worth the time. They tried to convince me I was not a wizard.
He leveled his gaze at James.
They were right.
James looked at him and shrugged.
Well, you're a wizard in my book. Hey, do we Dreadfuls have any natural powers?
We've been very good at understanding different languages.
Arthur said after a moment of silence.
That was why we picked up English when we came here to Erd.
James thought back some, trying to remember if this was true.
Wait a minute. I don't remember understanding languages. I would have been a whiz in French class if I could.
It doesn't work so well if you don't tap into it. That was how I became a Horp. A long time ago, I'd forgotten my roots. When I did that, I closed my mind to the powers in my blood. I couldn't understand Grawl or other languages.
How does knowing other languages make me powerful?
James asked. He was hoping he'd have inherited something more from his father other than a knack for multilingualism.
That was what your father discovered. You see, it led him to unlock far more powerful mysteries and to communicate with the great magics.
What's that?
They are exactly what they sound like. An armor god is one of the great magics, James.
You mean the things that eventually destroyed my father?
Oh, look, we're here.
Arthur said, and James looked up to see the old house he'd lived in until he was 5.
This is the last place you will see before we return to Nobracoso.
Please like and subscribe so you can be notified about more episodes of the Midjourney Storyteller.